Voedingsonderzoek in UGent is verspreid over verschillende faculteiten, over verschillende vakgroepen. En iedereen behandelt eigenlijk de relatie voeding en gezondheid vanuit zijn of haar expertise. We zijn perfect in staat om expertise te brengen rond samenstelling van een product, veiligheid, verpakking, presentatie van een product, aanvaardbaarheid, consumptie tot het gedrag van de consument. Daarnaast kunnen we ook gaan meten wat heeft voeding voor effect op gezondheid van mensen, zowel in populaties als individueel. Wat we eigenlijk proberen te doen is via één centraal aanknopingspunt, namelijk Food to Know, de stap naar de expertise te vergemakkelijken. Er gebeurt heel veel onderzoek op het gebied van voeding en gezondheid, maar ik denk dat een heel specifieke uitdaging is om beter onderzoek te doen dat eigenlijk nog sterkere resultaten geeft op effect van gezondheidswinst van voeding. Veel van de studies die we zien zijn te klein, te kort, heel specifiek op een aantal actieve componenten. Ik denk dat we iets breder moeten gaan, sterkere designs gaan ontwikkelen om te kijken van welke karakteristieken van een levensmiddel kunnen echt een mogelijk effect hebben op gezondheid.
Het MISAM-project is een uniek UGent-concept met een hoge graad aan interdisciplinariteit, waarbij verschillende actoren uit de faculteit farmaceutische wetenschappen, bio-ingenieurswetenschappen en dierengeneeskunde gaan samenwerken.
Het MISAM-project zal aantonen of het echt de moeite is om een voedingssupplement tijdens de zwangerschap aan te bevelen voor vrouwen in ontwikkelingslanden ter bestrijding van ondervoeding.
Dus wij gaan specifiek kijken op individueel niveau, dus op het moederniveau en op het kindniveau, hoe eigenlijk dat voedingssupplement gaat ageren. We gaan dat doen op mechanistisch niveau en we gaan verschillende interacties proberen te bewijzen en gaan analyseren om eventueel nieuwe biomarkers te gaan identificeren.
Op het einde van het project zullen de resultaten van de MISAM-studie samengelegd worden met de resultaten van andere landen. En wordt er eigenlijk bekeken van, is dit de moeite, kunnen we een voedingssupplement wereldwijd aanbevelen. Maar dit project is belangrijk in die zin dat het een mooi voorbeeld is van een samenwerking op een project waarbij dat echt van het concipiëren van een voedingssupplement tot het gezondheidswinst met mogelijke impact op beleid wereldwijd. Dus ik vind dat wel een mooi voorbeeld hoe voedingsonderzoek kan zijn en hoe het mogelijk kan evolueren in Vlaanderen.
Welcome to this presentation. My name is Filip van Bockstaele, and together with my colleague, Professor Lachat, we will present our expertise within the topic of healthy diets and new product development. I will start first with the part on new product development. Let me first introduce our research group Food Structure and Function. This research group was founded almost 20 years ago by my colleague Professor Koen de Wetting and is an internationally recognized group in the domain of microstructure-based food product development. Historically, the scope of our research has been on dairy and dairy alternatives, oils and fats with a link to bakery application, and chocolate and confectionery products. The research group is linked to several centers of expertise which have emerged during the years. More precisely, the Van de Moortles Center Lipid Science and Technology, Cacao Lab, the Milkobel Chair in Dairy Science, and the UGent Sensolab. Foods are highly diverse and complex structures composed out of many different building blocks which interact with each other and lead to certain functional properties. In our research, we aim to design food structures towards targeted functionalities, such as texture and mouthfeel, and flavor release, enhanced stability and shelf life, healthier formulations, and targeted digestibility, satiety, and nutrient bioavailability. Our research approach can be summarized as a multi-scale approach, starting from the nanoscale over the mesoscale, the microscale, and finally the macroscale level. To be able to study the physicochemical properties of foods at these different length scales, our group has a unique set of state-of-the-art tools including chromatography, differential scanning calorimetry, nuclear magnetic resonance, X-ray scattering, and rheological tools. Next to this, our group has a wide expertise in the visualization of food structures at the different length scales and by different complementary techniques. In-house, we possess of a state-of-the-art cryo-scanning electron microscope facility and polarized light microscopy. By collaborations within our faculty, we further use micro-CT, Raman spectroscopy, and confocal laser scanning microscopy for enhanced visualization of food structures. Many drivers exist to engage in new product development. This figure provided by Synergy nicely illustrates the current consumer trends towards food products. Food industry is for sure facing challenges towards reformulation of their food products, especially related to healthier consumption, composition, cleaner label, plant-based formulation, and personalized nutrition. Our group is actively performing research to provide insight and tools to aid in these challenges. Let us now move to some examples of our research expertise. Within the Van de Moortelen Center, we have been investigating alternatives for saturated fat, which is linked to the prevalence of cardiovascular diseases and thus needs to be restricted in our diet. Structuring liquid oil in foods is, however, very challenging, so many innovative approaches have been investigated, such as oleogelation, the inclusion of air as structure to create oil foams, or the formation of complex dispersions in which encapsulated oil is immobilized in a fat matrix, or within water droplets of a margarine, which results then in an oil in water in oil emulsion. Such complex structures could also be used to incorporate bioactive components in the inner oil phase, like for example vitamin A, which is known to be very sensitive to oxidation. In the clean label trend, many producers want to eliminate chemical preservatives, as these are very negatively perceived by consumers. In the search of clean label approaches for microbial shelf life, it is thus important to understand how microorganisms develop in food products. Moreover, it is our belief that also microstructure may be used as a hurdle to prevent growth of microorganisms. This picture shows the captation of microbial growth in the water droplets of a fat spread in a time frame over 12 hours after inoculation. And at the bottom, a molded spread sample is visualized with cryostat imaging. Our group, in collaboration with Cacao Lab, has a wide expertise in the formulation and characterization of chocolate and confectionery products. Chocolate is a dispersion of solid particles, sugar and cocoa solids in a crystallized matrix of cocoa butter, as you can nicely see on the left cryostat picture. Research in this domain focuses on sensory properties, ingredient functionality, and product stability, and also towards healthier products. A major trend nowadays is for sure the plant-based trend. In this respect, our group is investigating, for example, plant-based cheeses. It is clear that alternative structures based on plant proteins with quite similar textures can be designed. However, there is still a lack of the desired functional properties, such as, for example, meltability of the cheese. Moreover, sensory properties are often still not sufficiently matching the traditional products. To end this part on new product development, I just want to refer some ongoing research projects towards innovative and sustainable food products. A first project is the Insect Project, in which Dr. Dailan Sompassosa is investigating the valorization of insect components, including lipids and proteins, in different food structuring. In the Custom Meat Project, which is an SBO project, cultured meat cells are used to design meat alternatives. and in the Crop Explore project, functionality of alternative plant-based ingredients for food products is investigated. To summarize, we believe that our multi-scale approach is crucial to be able to rationally design the food products of the future with desired sensory properties, shelf life, and nutritional quality. And then I now hand over to my colleague, Lachat.
Nutritional properties. This is where I come in. I will present briefly the research we do at our research group with regard to nutrition under the topic of healthy diets. We are particularly interested to study the relationship between diet, food, dietary habits, nutrients for human health, and we do that using epidemiological study designs, so population nutrition research. For the purpose of today, I've structured our research around 3 focus areas. The first one is on how to do better nutrition research, so better methodologies. The second one is how to assess diet and diet as an exposure of health. And then the third one as an example of intervention studies that we do to make sure we can prove causal effects between what we eat and human health. We started working on research methods in nutrition to address an important challenge in nutrition research. The way we do research today needs to be better. I think we all realize how confusing messages around healthy eating can be. On a particular day, we hear, for instance, that coffee is good for you, and then a few months later a new study comes out and tells you it's associated with the risk of particular cancer. Now that confusion isn't helpful. It isn't helpful for consumers, it isn't helpful for industries, it isn't helpful for decision makers and policy makers that are supposed to act upon these recommendations. And the way we do research is a source of that confusion. We need to be able to do better research with more credible and trustworthy findings. Some of the research that we have done has addressed these challenges. We have looked specifically on how to add more value to nutrition research. How can we make it deliver more on investment? 3 aspects that we have worked on is first a critical assessment of the evidence. How good is the quality of nutrition research? How do we assess it? And when do we make strong decisions? Important here is that we use these tools to determine priority questions. What should we do? How should we design studies so we are really sure that they add value and they are addressing important research questions that have not yet been addressed in the past? A second item is how to make better use of existing data. A wide array of data is being generated on nutrition, from diets, but also on nutritional composition, that can be better used. We can use information technology, we can harness the power of computers to make data come together and yield more information. And a third aspect is how do we make sure we communicate research findings better? How do we make sure that papers are more complete so others can read them and act upon them? And how do we make sure that we communicate findings correctly to the media? These are 3 aspects that we have dealt in the past and that we have developed considerable expertise in. The second focus area is how to improve dietary assessment. How can we measure dietary intake more correctly? Diet is very difficult to measure. It's very difficult for people to recall what they have eaten and especially how much they have eaten on a daily basis, or over a year, for instance, in different seasons. So we try to develop new methodologies that measure diet as an exposure for human health. An example here is, for instance, the ongoing efforts to assess exposure of people to dietary mycotoxins in the Mycotox Health Consortium. So we measure how much people are consuming in terms of mycotoxins and we relate that to human health. We do that, for instance, in the context of child growth retardation in Africa, where we look at is mycotoxin intake, mycotoxin exposure related to malnutrition of children in Africa. A second area is how can we assess diet diversity more easily. So the diversity of diet, the number of food groups that people consume, is a very attractive indicator to use to assess dietary intakes. We collaborate with FAO, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, to develop a very simple tool that can be used by governments, but also by companies, for instance, to assess diets of women in an easy way. This is an indicator that will be used in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals as an easy way to describe diets of people all over the world. And a third example that we do on dietary assessment is work with the International Agency for Research on Cancer of the World Health Organization to look at how dietary intake is linked to biodiversity. How do we appraise or assess diversity of foods and variety of foods in a diet? And is there a relationship between that richness, that diversity of diets, and a number of health outcomes, such as cancers? A third area are intervention studies. We do experimental studies to test the effect of foods, nutrients, and diets on the health of vulnerable groups, for instance, women and children. A typical design that is used is a randomized controlled intervention study, an RCT, where you give a treatment to people and you compare it to a control group. For instance, we are doing a randomized controlled treatment to test the effect of a nutritional supplement during pregnancy on the health of women and children in Burkina Faso. The supplement that we are testing will be considered for global recommendations for pregnant women in low and middle income countries. It is a big study that combines epidemiological design with mechanistic approaches. So we take biospecimen samples where we look at what happens in terms of metabolism, in terms of metabolic programming during pregnancy to improve health of children. This study, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, shows us how nutrition research can be done and is an example of a large intervention study with different components and different groups involved that can produce strong and robust recommendations for a global intervention to improve nutrition and health of vulnerable groups. I think it provides a nice example on how nutrition research can be conducted and how it can lead to better and stronger recommendations to improve health of humans. Now I end this presentation. I show you our contact details. Feel free to get in touch with us or to reach out in case of questions and comments. We'll be available to answer some of your questions. Thank you.